To date, we've run over 500 workshops, probably more, for chiropractors all over the world. And there's these elements to a workshop. One is getting people to register for the workshop, but a really misunderstood part is actually getting people to show up to the workshop. And it's very misunderstood. And my greatest saying or lesson with this is casualness leads to casualty. So I'm going to really unpack this for you today, is why your prospects and patients or potential patients and guests will register for a workshop and then still not show up, and the critical mistakes you're making to enable that. Here's exactly how I get workshop attendees to actually show up to the workshop. So the marketplace has really changed when it comes to workshops. And we've run over 500 workshops for chiropractors all around the world, and defined workshops in many ways before. There's orientation workshops, there's lunch and learns, there's dinner with the doc, there is workshops outside of your practice, inside of your practice, there's hybrid type workshops where we advertise and we invite our existing guests. There's even patient appreciation events, which can be classed as a workshop. There's many different types of workshops. But what we're seeing in the market is we might get 60, 70 people register for a workshop, but only 5 or 10 people were showing up. Let's start with this. Industry standards for any workshops, free workshops in a physical location, the industry standard across the board is show up rate to a free thing is around 20%. That's industry standard, right? When it comes to free events. So let's start there and say, okay, that means that if we want 20 people in the room and we're sloppy with our processes to get them to show up, we have to get a lot of registrants at only a 20% show up rate. So the idea of this video is for you to get more bang for your buck, for you to understand that, hey, if we want 20 to 25 people, which is for many of you worth $30, $40, $50,000 in some cases, especially like neuropathy and things like that, those type of workshops. If we have 50 or 60 registrants, we want to be able to get 20 to 30 people to show up in the room, and we're aiming for close to 50% show up rate. How do we do that? How do we aim for a 50% show up rate when most of the industry or the industry standard for free event is just 20%? Here's how. So let's take one step back. Once you've got a registrant, let's say online, you'll get notified. What we find is, probably you've heard me say the sentence before, the defining aspect of whether they show up is whether you're casual with your follow-up. So the one sentence that your team needs to hear is casualness leads to casualty. I'm going to give you 3 or 4 ninja moves to get people to show up to your workshops. And if you do this, I promise you, your show up rate is going to so outperform everyone you know. It's unbelievable. And that allows you to spend more on the workshop and get more return of investment. We have had people follow this formula. This is unusual results, but there are people that are within our group getting 80 to 90% show up rates. Again, anything close to 50% is great going. I just quickly want to talk about how many people we want to show up to the workshop. Everyone thinks that more is better. Not always. Sometimes higher conversion rates are slightly smaller workshops, especially if you're still learning your skill or your art or your ability to what they call platform sell. Sometimes, 10 in a workshop is ideal, especially the size of practice, etc. You can be a lot more hands-on, and conversion rates are normally higher for those 10 people. So here's what you're going to do to get people to show up to the event. Number 1, when people register, typically some of you will understand the process of a follow-up system that reminds the person that's registered for the workshop closer to the time. But that's a big mistake to leave it to that. So we have AI now that does most of this follow-up. When someone registers, our AI program will actually not only just set up the reminder sequence, but crucially, and if you don't have AI, you will do this manually, it phones every single person that registered within 1 minute of registering. And you're going to be saying, I wonder why we're doing that, because they've booked the time. They don't really need a phone call. We're not phoning in to book. They've already booked the workshop. They get sent notifications about the time and location, all those things. It's a really big mistake to leave it just to the reminder emails and text to get them to show up. So we phone them immediately, and the line is, this is just a courtesy call. We've seen you've just registered, and we just want to get some extra details from you. Now, the number 1 response you're looking for and how you know you're nailing it is when they answer the phone, they say, wow, that was fast. You're already so significantly ahead of the curve, because most people won't take that extra effort. So do make sure you do that. Now, we have people that use our Done For You service where we, as I say, we filled way over 500 workshops where we'll do the ads for them. they will get the notification that someone has opted into their workshop. Just before AI became a thing, we now have, I think, 52 practices using all our AI processes and phone calls, etc. But before AI, they would still make sure they phoned. Some people are now done for you program that haven't not ready for AI just yet, and what they will do, they will manually phone. So point number one is be absolutely over the top with that initial phone call. It so significantly bumps show-up rates. Your next question you may be asking is, well, what are we going to say on that phone call? Which brings you to point number two. The first point is just to create a wow moment. You want them to say, wow, that was fast. Then the opening line is, hey, this is a courtesy call. I see you've just registered. We just want to get a few extra bits of information from you. We're really excited to see you at the event. Now we're going to kind of ninja move number two. Ninja move number two is on that call, when you've got them on the phone, you want to establish a few things. Number one, you want the customer, you want to answer any questions. So like, hey, do you know where we are? Do you know where parking is? Those type of things. Next, another goal of that phone call is to upsell and invite a guest. A huge part of the process. So the AI system we use, it literally upsells. It's like a 20% upsell rate. So 20% of the customers that are coming to the workshop, if you ask them who would you like to bring, will bring a guest. Again, if you look at how expensive it's become to acquire customers from online, if you've got 10 people confirmed and 2 to 3 of those bring a guest, in some cases 30 to 40% bump in show-up rate just by getting people to bring a guest. So don't miss that point. This is crucial to making the numbers work in your favor. Next, we want to ask them a few questions. Now, we have found that if we say to the workshop attendee, Dr. Smith is going to be looking after you, and we always ask everyone who's attend is, what is the number one question they want answered at the workshop? What's the number one reason they registered? What this does is really give you ammunition as the speaker, and also nothing will improve your close rate more being able to name check. So in the workshop, there's only 10 or 15 people there. Trust me if I tell you this, that if you get a name and you're able to say, Leah, I believe you really wanted to find out about what foods are significantly increasing inflammation in the body. That not only really impresses the customer, but is huge for close rates. I'll tell you a little interesting fact. Just on webinars, by the way, we found that if you name check, mention people's names in the webinar and where they're from, etc., we can see a significant spike in the people that are mentioned in the webinar from a purchasing perspective. It's the same in the live room. So go that little step extra to make them feel special. It makes such a huge difference to how they feel as well as the close rate. Point number 3 for that phone call is, when you're on the phone call, you want to do something called the ethical guilt trip. So a little funny story of how I came up with this strategy. It's called the ethical guilt trip, and it's really off the back of being invited places for dinners and meals. People will laugh. People who know me well will watch this and they will nod and they will smile. If my wife was here right now, she would also nod and smile. I'm not the most natural socialite in the world when it comes to dinner parties and being invited to places, etc. I'm an introvert extrovert in many times in my life. So I like being on stage and things like that, but actually behind the scenes I'm quite an introvert in many ways. Put me in front of the camera, put me on stage, I'm good. In many other ways, I'm quite an introvert. But what I found was, when someone asks you, invites you to a party and you have to RSVP, or they have to take your catering details, or you know they're doing something special for you, what I found was I literally had this feeling in my stomach of, oh shoot, I have to show up now. And that's became the strategy, is understanding that when you have them on the phone and you're able to say, who's coming? Are you bringing a guest? And just checking, are there any special dietary requirements? What will happen in the customer is that they will realize, oh shoot, they're catering for us. That immediately creates a different level of commitment. Now, you can't do this enough. By the way, you don't have to cater at these events, but if you are catering, use this strategy. I'll tell you another example of this in a moment. So when people cater and when they say, do you have any dietary requirements? And when they reiterate that they're catering, guess what happens to the show-up rate? Once they've RSVP'd, it goes through the roof. And especially if you're catering for a guest and you're able to say that, all good, we're catering for you, don't worry about food that night, it's all taken care of, and it makes a huge, huge difference. Now, some of my customers weren't able to use this strategy because they weren't catering at these events. I have found that catering significantly spikes show-up rates, but if you don't cater, that's absolutely fine. You've got 2 other similar type analogies. Also, ethical guilt trips. In those cases, we would get the customer, we used to do it in our own practices, we didn't cater food, but we would make sure that the person coming to the workshop knew we were providing a gift or preparing a gift. we would say that. Some of my coaching clients have taken this to another level, but we just used to say, that's awesome, we've got a little goodie bag for you when you arrive. And just saying that made a difference. Some of my coaching clients have taken this one step further and tested this with saying, hey, what's your t-shirt size? We just got a little gift for you when you arrive. Now imagine the person doing the free workshop says to you, hey, we've got a t-shirt size for you, or the catering, or we've prepared the gift. These are ways that people massively increase show up rates. So every industry has to think about these things to get people to show up more. One of my, let's call them a competitor, and it's someone I admire in a slightly different niche, not in chiropractic, has got an event coming up in Hollywood. To get an increased show-up rate, part of the ticket was actually a hotel room. Think about that for a second. They knew that giving them the hotel room made such a difference to the people coming to the event, and if there are more people at the event, they can get more customers in their business. That's another example of that. Disney gives away, practically gives away hotel rooms at their Disney associated hotels, again, in exchange for a signature that you will commit to sitting in one of their sales workshops. Think about that for a second. They will give you basically hotel rooms for 75% off on the basis that you will show up, that you commit to showing up to their workshop. So they will bribe people with hotel rooms, both these people. We are saying you've got an opportunity to ethically bribe them with RSVP, food confirmation, RSVP gift, or tell them you're giving them a gift, and or t-shirt size. That's the ethical guilt trip. So far we've covered, make sure you contact them immediately as a courtesy call. Second, on the call, you've got some key points. You've got to make sure you invite guests, and then you've got to do more to get them to show up. The ethical guilt trip can be three things. It can be RSVP from a food perspective, it can be a gift, and it can be some type of t-shirt size, etc. I briefly mentioned it, and that was, if you've got them on the call, it's really handy to ask them what they would most like to learn at the workshop for many reasons, but don't miss the opportunity to get their name, who asked the question, because that does wonders for your close rate. One more point on that. If you can't get them on the phone, often that's the reason that you got the excuse to keep phoning them, which is my last point. Don't take a no response as a response. So we had a rule. If someone registered for a workshop, we went until we got hold of them. Now, the best way to do this is if they register 10 days before the workshop or 7 days before the workshop, and you phone and you phone and you phone and you phone and no one answers, eventually we would send a message or a text to go, I'm just checking we got the right number. I'm so sorry to bother you, be apologetic, but we have catering and we want to make sure that we cater correctly for you tonight. So just want to make sure you're getting these and we have the right number. Typically that would elicit some type of response from them. But we had a rule for the CAs that they were not allowed to stop until they got a response. In fact, later on in life, in my other business, when we didn't get a response, we would send them a message saying, we haven't heard back from you, we're giving up your seat. And sometimes that will get the response. But we would be absolutely militant in the fact that if we have not heard back from them, that's not nothing. We haven't heard back from them. It's common courtesy these days to RSVP, so we'll go until we get a response from them. Now, often, even if it's a voicemail, let's say they respond to you, but you can't get them on the phone. The last point is send them a little Google Doc questionnaire, and it's 3 or 4 questions. And it's what number 1 question you'd most like to be answered, what's the reason you registered for this workshop, and then on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for you to sort out X, Y, and Z. So if you haven't spoken to them on the phone, you can still get the questions from them by sending them a link for them to fill out those questions. I believe so much in this. I created an entire YouTube video just on this. Almost nobody teaches this. They think that workshops is just once you get registered, you're fine. That is very seldom the case. And believe me when I say we have swung show-up rates, sometimes 2 or 3 people out of 40 registrants, to the same amount of registrants, 40 people and 25 registrants, just by implementing this. So ignore this at your peril, and you'll see how much it changes your ROI just by increasing show-up rates. And it's formulaic. It works like an absolute bomb. Make sure you do that in your next workshop, and you'll see your return on investment go through the roof.